Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm really excited to get into this one.
And I'm the expert for today, ready to unpack some really intense history.
Yeah, intense is definitely the word. So I want you to picture waking up in the dead of night, just, choking.
Oh, wow.
You sit up in the dark, and you're coughing uncontrollably.
Sounds awful.
Right. You put a hand to your mouth, and when you pull it away, it's wet with blood.
Terrifying. Just the absolute worst nightmare for most people.
Exactly. You stumble out of bed, your chest is heaving, and you wander across the cold floor of your room. You lean out the window just to get some air.
Yeah.
And then you make your way over to the wash basin to, scrub the blood off your face and hands.
I mean, for anyone, that's the horrifying realization of your own mortality right there.
It is. But for the man we're talking about today, as the bleeding finally stopped, he didn't feel terror.
Wait, really?
No, he felt this profound, overwhelming wave of relief.
Wow. That's dark.
Because for the first time in years, he knew he was finally going to be able to sleep.
That is just such a powerful image. And it makes sense psychologically. That physical eruption of blood, it essentially acted as a pressure valve for a mind that was just completely consumed by dread.
Right, because when the maid walked into his room the next morning, saw the blood, and bluntly told him, you won't live long, doctor, he wasn't horrified at all.
No, not at all. Because the internal torment he lived with was so unbearable that when it finally manifested as this fatal, visible, physical illness, which was tuberculosis, his mind could actually just relax.
It's like the invisible enemy was finally visible.
Exactly. The internal rot had finally proven itself to be real.
And that man, of course, is Franz Kafka.
The master of modern literary despair himself.
Yeah. And today we're taking a deep dive into a dynamic that fundamentally rewrites how we understand one of the most famous literary romances of the 20th century.
It really does flip the whole narrative on its head.
We're looking at the legendary torrential correspondence between Kafka and the Czech journalist and translator Milena Jesenská.
And what's really fascinating here is the specific sources we have for this deep dive.
Right. The linguistic lens we're using is wild. We're looking at excerpts of these letters that have actually been translated into Arabic, which we are now analyzing in English.
Yeah, and we're drawing upon the philosophical critiques of his behavior by the renowned editor Willy Haas.
It's such a complex, multi-layered way to examine things. But, it's fitting for a man who spent his entire life obsessed with the barriers of communication, right?
Absolutely. The linguistic journey of these texts is a story in itself.
Yeah.
Think about it. From Kafka's original German, responding to Milena's Czech, filtered through Arabic translation, and now being discussed by us in English. It's the perfect metaphor for the alienation Kafka felt every waking second of his life.
Every translation adds, a layer of distance, a slight mutation of the meaning.
Exactly. And Kafka was terrified of exactly that kind of distance. Yet at the same time, he actively, ruthlessly engineered it in his own life.
Right, which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive, because this correspondence is so often held up as proof that Kafka was capable of this sweeping, passionate love.
The whole star-crossed lovers narrative.
Exactly, but when you do a close philosophical reading, it strips that romantic veneer entirely away.
It completely vanishes.
So let's unpack this. What if this wasn't an awakening of love at all? What if what we're actually looking at is an elaborate, meticulously constructed laboratory for psychological self-torture?
That is the big question.
Yeah.
And to answer it, we really need to set the stage physically.
Okay, so it's the spring of 1920.
Right.
The world is just starting to dig itself out from the rubble of the First World War.
Empires have dissolved. Borders are completely redrawn everywhere.
Yeah, and the Spanish flu is still this raw, open wound on the global psyche. And over in Vienna, we have Milena
Jesenská. She's young, fiercely modern, rebellious.
And she's trapped in a deteriorating marriage, trying to carve out an identity as a journalist.
So she reaches out to this relatively obscure German-speaking Jewish writer living in Prague.
Right, Franz Kafka.
Yeah.
And her request is entirely professional. She just wants to translate his short story, The Stoker, into Czech.
It starts as a completely standard transactional conversation between an author and a translator.
Yeah, just discussing publication rights, linguistic nuances, that kind of thing.
Right. The mechanics of bringing a German text into a Czech consciousness. But the velocity of what happens next, It just defies all professional boundaries.
It really does. The spark is instantaneous and almost violently intense. I mean, what starts as a discussion about grammar ignites into an absolute torrent of letters.
We're talking about roughly 140 letters and postcards written in the span of just 10 months.
From Mook to December 1920.
Exactly. There are days when he is writing to her multiple times a day.
And you read about a man writing 140 letters to a woman in 10 months, and the cultural reflex is to say, you know, he was hopelessly devoted. It's so romantic.
Yeah, that's the Hollywood version.
But if you pause and really look at the mechanics of this communication, another reality emerges. I mean, he wasn't discovering love.
No, he really wasn't.
He was discovering a perfectly safe vacuum. He found this highly controlled, isolated environment where he could project his absolute darkest fears.
And he could do it without ever having to face the terrifying reality of an actual physical human being sitting across from him.
Exactly. So to understand why he needed that vacuum so badly, we have to establish the psychological architecture of his mind.
This is where Willi Haas's analysis becomes so crucial. His critique centers heavily on a very specific philosophical concept.
Right, one that's rooted deeply in the German tradition.
Yes, the concept of angst.
Now, we throw the word angst around pretty casually today, right? We talk about teenage angst and frame it as this sort of moody, temporary annoyance with the world.
Yeah, like rolling your eyes at your parents.
Exactly. But in the context of early 20th century German philosophy, angst is something infinitely more heavy.
It is the absolute opposite of a temporary mood. In the philosophical framework, if you think of Kierkegaard or later existentialists, angst isn't anxiety about something specific.
It's not like the fear of missing a train or failing a math test.
No, not at all. It is a foundational existential dread. It is the terror of existence itself.
The dizzying realization of your own freedom.
Right, and the overwhelming nothingness that just surrounds human life. For Kafka, this angst was the lens through which he processed every single waking moment.
It wasn't just a part of his life, it was a paralyzing driving force.
It dictated everything. His relationship to his family, to his writing, and absolutely to women.
And that dread completely hijacks these letters almost the moment they begin. I mean, within a few exchanges, they stop talking about translating the Stoker entirely.
The letters become his literal life support system.
Yeah. He writes to Milena that a day without a letter from her is bleak, frowning, and empty.
Which is just a staggering amount of pressure to put on someone.
Definitely. In one specific instance, he actually admits that he spent an entire day writing a short story just so he could stay connected to her in his mind.
Right. The act of writing the story wasn't for the sake of art anymore.
No.
It was purely a mechanism to maintain that tether to Milena.
But we have to question the nature of that tether, you know? Like, is he craving Milena, the breathing, complex woman living in Vienna?
Or is he just craving the ritual of writing to Milena?
Exactly. And Kafka actually provides a terrifyingly clear answer to this. He described the act of writing letters as having intercourse with ghosts.
That phrasing is so haunting.
It really is. And he was highly specific about this, too. He didn't just mean the ghost of the person receiving the letter. He meant his own ghost as well.
So he's recognizing his own disembodiment in the process.
Yeah. Let's translate that into a concept you interact with today, just to make it clear. It's essentially as if Kafka built a highly advanced virtual reality simulation of himself.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. And in this environment, he coded an avatar. Let's call her Paper Milena.
I love that. Paper Milena.
And this avatar is flawless. She's totally receptive, and she only exists when he boots up the program by putting pen to paper.
Inside this simulation, he can bare his soul, confess his deepest sins, and experience the adrenaline rush of intimacy.
But, and this is the key, he gets to do all of this without the chaotic, unpredictable presence of a physical human being.
He loved the avatar. The actual user on the other end, the real Milena, was almost incidental.
It's just wild that the creation of Paper Milena is such a brilliant philosophical defense mechanism when you think about it.
It really is. By confining the entirety of the relationship to ink and paper, Kafka was systematically stripping away the material world.
Because the material world is where his angst thrives in its most uncontrollable form.
Exactly. Physical presence demands compromise. It requires you to react in real time to a furrowed brow or a change in tone.
Or just the independent agency of another human being. They might disagree with you.
Right. But by reducing Milena to a recipient, he became the literal author of the relationship.
He created a perfectly controlled environment where he was entirely sovereign. He controlled the spigot of intimacy.
Yes. If he felt overwhelmed by his own emotions, he could just delay writing.
And if he felt an intense need for connection, He could fire off 3 letters in a single afternoon.
He never had to deal with Milena having a bad day.
Or Milena disagreeing with his philosophical despair in real time. He was basically carrying on a dialogue with a mirror.
The ghost is safe. The human being is a threat. And this highly controlled, hermetically sealed environment allowed his angst to be examined, documented, and fueled without the immediate threat of it destroying a real-world dynamic.
But of course, Kafka, being Kafka, he didn't use this safe vacuum to actually find peace.
Oh no, peace would be highly alarming to him.
Right. Peace is suspicious. So instead, he turns this correspondence into an active laboratory for engineering anxiety.
It's a compulsion for him.
There is this maddening paradox in the sources that perfectly illustrates this. He writes to Milena, telling her explicitly not to write to him every day.
And he frames it as this noble, selfless request, right?
Totally. He tells her that writing daily is a burden on her, that she's living a difficult life in gloomy Vienna, and that she needs her rest.
Very considered on the surface.
But then, practically in the next sentence of the exact same letter, he begs her to ignore his advice and write to him every single day anyway.
It is a textbook psychological double bind.
Yeah.
And it serves a highly specific, agonizing purpose. By establishing a rigid rule like, do not write to me daily, and then immediately pleading with her to violate that rule, he guarantees that the relationship can never achieve equilibrium.
It forces the whole dynamic to constantly teeter on the edge of a cliff.
Every single time she puts a letter in the post, it transforms from a simple act of communication into this thrilling, terrifying transgression.
He essentially sets a tripwire in his own mind.
Exactly.
If she obeys the rule and then doesn't write, he falls into a state of bleak despair because his lifeline is cut.
But if she does write, she is breaking his noble command.
Which artificially heightens the emotional stakes of the interaction. It turns a piece of paper into a high-stakes dramatic event.
He requires that tension to survive. The anxiety is his baseline reality.
And he even articulates this to her. He writes that they share these strange qualities of anxiety and fear.
Yes. He doesn't describe the letters sitting on his desk as inanimate objects.
No, what does he call them? Living creatures trembling with fear about what the next letter will contain.
That image letters as trembling creatures is just staggering.
It really is. He is projecting his own existential dread so powerfully that it literally animates the paper itself.
And by doing this, he's pulling her into his orbit of panic.
Right, here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. He's not just expressing his own fear, he's taking his highly individualized agony and forcing it to become a shared phenomenon.
He is telling her, we are the same. You are just as terrified as I am.
He's effectively colonizing her emotional landscape.
That's a great way to put it. Because when Milena would write to him about her actual, tangible, real-world struggles, like her strained marriage or her financial worries in Milena Kafka, would frequently just absorb those practical problems.
Yeah, and then reinterpret them entirely through the lens of his own existential suffering.
The correspondence ceases to be a true dialogue. It becomes an incredibly dense, complex monologue where Milena is utilized as a sounding board for his internal terror.
And the primary weapon he uses to maintain control over this monologue is this extreme, almost violent form of self-deprecation.
It's hard to read sometimes.
You read these letters, and he is just relentlessly degrading himself. I mean, he refers to himself as a soft worm crawling on the ground.
He declares himself impure, introverted, selfish, melancholic.
In one very famous passage, he actually warns her that she wouldn't be able to stand being beside him for even 2 days.
Now, on a superficial reading, one might view this as tragic humility. The low self-esteem of a tortured genius.
Right, the misunderstood artist.
But viewed through a philosophical and psychoanalytical lens, this preemptive self-loathing isn't humility at all. It is a highly sophisticated, impenetrable defensive fortress.
Let's really break down the mechanics of this trap, because it is brilliantly designed to ensure he never actually has to face real intimacy.
Okay, let's look at it.
He presents himself to her as an absolute monster, right?
Yeah.
And an unlovable, broken worm.
Yes.
And by doing that, he basically gives Milena 2 options. Option A, she believes him, she is repulsed by this creature crawling on the ground, and she pushes him away.
And if she chooses option A, Kafka is safe.
Right.
He avoids the terror of a real relationship, and his negative worldview is validated. He can retreat into his isolation with the grim satisfaction of knowing he was right all along about being unlovable.
But option B is where the trap truly springs shut.
Yeah.
What if she stays? What if she replies, "No, Franz, I don't see a worm. I see you and I care for you"?
Then he gets to write off her love entirely.
Exactly. He gets to say, well, if you love me, you clearly don't understand me.
Precisely. If she stays despite his dire warnings, it proves to him that she does not see the real Kafka.
Because the real Kafka, in his mind, is an unlovable worm.
Therefore, her love must be directed at an illusion, a misunderstanding.
Wow.
And because her love is based on a delusion, the relationship is fundamentally invalid and doomed.
It's an inescapable philosophical closed loop.
Either she rejects him, validating his misery, or she accepts him, proving she is deluded, which also validates his misery.
It's bulletproof. He has engineered a psychological scenario where it is mathematically impossible for him to experience the risk of being truly known and accepted.
He weaponizes his insecurity to guarantee his isolation.
And this weaponization doesn't just stop at his psychology. It bleeds directly into his physical reality.
This is where we have to talk about the tuberculosis.
Right. It is such a critical component of his defense system.
We obviously have to acknowledge the stark medical reality here. Kafka really did have tuberculosis.
Yeah, it wasn't made up.
No, it was a brutal, deadly disease that was actively destroying his lungs and would eventually end his life.
But what is philosophically fascinating is how he integrated this fatal physical illness into his existential argument against life.
He transforms a medical diagnosis into a philosophical shield.
He writes to Milena and tells her, point blank, that he is spiritually sick.
He frames the destruction of his lungs not as a biological infection, but as the outward, undeniable physical proof of his inner moral and spiritual corruption.
Which brings us back to that terrifying anecdote we started with, waking up and coughing blood.
Yes.
He actually shares this specific horrific memory with Milena. He describes waking up in the night, the uncontrollable bleeding, the wandering around the room, washing at the basin.
And then that profound relief.
The realization that his insomnia, which was the mental manifestation of his angst, was finally going to be cured by the physical manifestation of his disease.
He could finally sleep because the internal enemy had broken the surface. It was finally a fair fight, in a weird way.
And he uses this physical reality to construct an unassailable barrier against Milena.
How so?
Well, when the conversation in the letters turns to the possibility of them actually meeting in person, he doesn't just say, I am feeling too weak to take the train.
Right.
He claims that he would require a stretcher just to endure a journey to Vienna.
The fear he is articulating there transcends medical fatigue. He is framing his illness as an existential contamination.
Contamination.
I believe his entire being was fundamentally broken, and he was terrified of infecting her. But he wasn't afraid of passing on the tuberculosis bacillus.
No, he was terrified of passing on his existential rot.
Exactly. The physical illness was the perfect, undeniable metaphor for his unsuitability for a real-world union.
Because, how can anyone demand a functioning, normal romantic relationship from a man who requires a stretcher to leave his city?
The illness becomes the ultimate protector against the demands of human connection.
It is the ultimate doctor's note to excuse him from the terrifying responsibilities of living.
A permanent excuse.
And this intense fear and exhaustion isn't limited to his own body. It extends outward to the entire physical, operational world around him.
Oh, the letters are just full of this. Interspersed with these soaring, agonizing, philosophical confessions are endless. Obsessive complaints about the mundane realities of early 20th century Europe.
He writes obsessively about passports,
Date schedules.
the behavior of border guards, the agonizing process of finding a suitable hotel room in Murano.
The weather.
Yes, the impenetrable bureaucracy of simply moving from point A to point B.
But philosophically, what is a border crossing to a man like Kafka?
What is it?
It is the physical manifestation of an ontological barrier. It is a literal, state-sanctioned obstacle preventing two entities from joining.
So the border guard checking his papers isn't just a guy doing his job.
No, to Kafka, that guard is an agent of the universe,
Yeah.
explicitly tasked with keeping him isolated.
Wow. And for you listening, this is the literal origin of the word Kafkaesque.
Yes, exactly.
When we use that term today, we're describing a nightmarish, complex, bizarre, and utterly illogical bureaucratic system that crushes the individual.
And you see the actual seeds of his greatest novels, like The Trial and the Castle, germinating right here in his daily correspondence with Milena.
The parallels are undeniable. Joseph K. in The Trial is trapped by a legal system that operates on rules he can't comprehend, let alone challenge.
And Kay in the Castle spends the entire novel trying to reach a bureaucratic authority that is always endlessly just out of reach.
In these letters, Kafka is actively trapped by the post-war bureaucracy of Europe, but more profoundly, he is trapped by the bureaucracy of his own mind.
Every delayed train, every stamped passport, it all carries the exact same existential weight as his failing lungs.
It is all accumulating evidence that the universe is fundamentally designed to frustrate and isolate him.
The mundane world is just as hostile as his internal world. Getting a stamp on a piece of paper is a terrifying confrontation with authority.
And this feeling of being fundamentally cut off from the real world, of being separated by insurmountable barriers, it extends deeply into his relationship with language itself.
Which is fascinating given that they were writers.
Exactly. And this is where the translation of these letters becomes incredibly poignant. Kafka was writing to Milena primarily in German, which was his native tongue.
And Milena was a native Czech speaker.
Right. And Kafka begins to develop this profound anxiety that the German language itself is inadequate for expressing his deepest, most agonizing truths to her.
He views German as too rigid, too structured, perhaps too polite to carry the weight of his angst.
He actually begs Milena to write to him exclusively in Czech.
He believed there was a fundamental difference in how she existed across the two languages.
Yeah, he wrote that all of Milena existed only in Czech.
When she wrote to him in German, he felt she was putting on a linguistic mask, trying to sound like a refined, polite Viennese woman.
He is searching for an absolute, unmediated authenticity.
Because he's terrified that her true essence is being lost in translation, and not just in the literal sense of vocabulary.
But in the ontological sense.
Yes, he believes her second language is hiding her true self, creating yet another barrier between them.
And this obsession with linguistic authenticity reaches a fever pitch around a single Czech word.
Oh, this is such a crucial detail.
The word is nechapu.
Nechapu.
Right. It translates simply to, I don't understand.
But Kafka doesn't just read the translation and move on.
No, of course not. He dissects this word as if it holds the secret to human connection.
He analyzes its sound, its rhythm, the physical act of the mouth forming the syllables.
He perceives a specific harshness, a raw finality in nechapu that he feels is completely absent from the German equivalent.
By obsessing over the phonetics of nechapu, Kafka is trying to bypass the intellect and connect with the raw nerve of the language.
He distrusts his own ability to convey his true self in his native tongue, and he projects this distrust onto Milena.
Language, which should be the bridge connecting them, becomes another labyrinth he has to navigate.
Because he is so terrified of being a fake, of projecting an illusion.
And this desperate, consuming fear that he is a fraud, that everything he is and does is fundamentally impure. It's perfectly captured in a story he tells Milena.
Oh, the Dostoevsky story. The way he frames this anecdote is just a masterpiece of self-revelation.
It is probably one of the most profound glimpses into Kafka's crippling imposter syndrome in the entire correspondence.
So he writes to Milena about this legendary night in the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky's early career.
Right.
Dostoevsky is young, unknown, and has just finished his first novel, Poor Folk.
He hands the manuscript to his friend, a writer named Grigorovich.
And Grigorovich reads it, is absolutely blown away by its genius, and takes it in secret to the most feared and famous literary critic in Russia, Nekrasov.
The two of them read it together.
And they are so overwhelmed by the sheer power of the book that at 3 a.m. in the dead of night, they march through the streets to Dostoevsky's apartment.
They burst into his room, wake him up, and are literally hugging him and kissing him.
Nekrasov declares him the hope of Russia.
It is the moment of absolute, pure literary triumph.
It is the pinnacle of validation, a moment where an artist is finally undeniably seen and celebrated by his peers.
But the story Kafka focuses on is what happens after the celebration.
Right. After Nekrasov and Grigorovich leave the apartment, Dostoevsky walks over to his window.
He leans out into the cold night air, watches these two men walk away into the distance, and he begins to weep.
But he is not crying tears of joy or relief.
No.
He is crying because he is suddenly overcome with the suffocating feeling that he is an absolute fraud.
He thinks about how noble, genuine, and pure-hearted these two men are to come to him in the middle of the night just to praise him.
And then he looks at himself and he feels entirely fake, impure, and utterly unworthy of their admiration.
Now, the critical analytical question is, why does Kafka choose to tell this specific story to Milena at this point in their correspondence?
What's the parallel?
He is using Dostoevsky as a historical stand-in for his own psyche. He is mapping his own relationship with Milena onto this 3:30 a.m. encounter in St. Petersburg.
He is basically saying to her, "You are Grigorovich. You're a Nekrasov. You are noble. You are genuine. You are pure.
You are writing these beautiful letters praising me, offering me love and connection.
But if you could only see the real me, the imposter, the fake, the impure worm leaning out the window crying, you would be horrified.
Exactly. He is fundamentally incapable of internalizing validation.
His core belief is that he is corrupt.
Therefore, any love or praise directed at him must be based on a case of mistaken identity.
He projects all spiritual nobility onto Milena, turning her into an unblemished ideal, and hoards all the impurity, all the angst, for himself.
And the philosophical conclusion he draws from this is devastating.
Because he is fake and impure, a union with her, someone who is real and true, is logically impossible.
It would be a defilement of her purity.
It is incredibly tragic. He builds a pedestal for her so high that he can never reach it, which is exactly the point.
It's all part of the architecture of his misery.
And as we map out all these defensive tactics, the paradox of demand, the self-deprecation trap of the worm, the weaponized tuberculosis, the obsessive linguistic barriers, the profound imposter syndrome, a larger, even more unsettling pattern emerges.
Because this wasn't a unique reaction triggered by Milena.
No, this was his established modus operandi.
To understand the Milena correspondence, we have to view it within the broader context of Kafka's life. Milena Jesenská was not the first woman to be drawn into Kafka's laboratory of pain.
We have to look at the precedent set by Felice Bauer.
Yes. The numbers involving Felice Bauer are staggering.
Before Milena, Kafka carried on a correspondence with Felice that spanned 5 years.
It amounted to over 800 pages of letters.
5 years, 800 pages, and they were officially engaged to be married not once, but twice.
And who dismantled both of those engagements?
Kafka did.
He meticulously constructed the relationship through letters, brought it to the absolute precipice of physical, real-world reality, which is marriage, and then destroyed it.
He blew them up. And the second time he broke off the engagement to Felice, do you know the excuse he deployed?
His newly diagnosed tuberculosis.
Yep. He used the physical disease as the ultimate, irrefutable exit strategy from a commitment.
Over the course of his life, Kafka had 3 broken engagements before he finally married on his deathbed.
The pattern is undeniable, but what is crucial to notice is the escalation.
How do you mean?
Well, with Felice Bauer, it took him 5 years and 800 pages to cycle through the infatuation, the reliance, the engineering of anxiety, the self-sabotage, and the final withdrawal.
But with Milena, he condensed that entire grueling cycle into just 10 months and 140 letters.
He had refined the art of the doomed relationship. He had perfected the mechanics of his own heartbreak.
And you might be asking, why are we analyzing his dating history?
Right. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
The contrast between Felice and Milena highlights his absolute terror of reality.
Felice Bauer was, in many ways, a conventional, available woman.
She was willing to marry him, willing to set up a home.
And that made her dangerously possible.
A real life with Felice was an actual imminent threat to his isolation.
But Milena was fundamentally different. Milena was perfect precisely because she was impossible.
She was legally married to another man.
She lived in Vienna while he was tied to Prague.
She was intellectually complex, rebellious, and dealing with her own turbulent life.
She checked every single box required to ensure that a relationship could never actually materialize into a boring, domestic, day-to-day reality.
For Kafka, the impossibility of Milena was not an unfortunate obstacle.
It wasn't a bug, it was a feature.
It was a foundational prerequisite for his passion.
The geographic distance and the marital barriers were the safety nets that allowed him to perform his emotional high-wire act.
He could pour his absolute soul onto the page. He could unleash the full, terrifying force of his angst, because he knew, with absolute certainty, that he would never have to sit across from her at the breakfast table on a Tuesday morning and figure out how to be a functioning partner.
The ultimate proof of this dynamic is what happened when the paper simulation was breached.
Because they did actually meet in the physical world.
The correspondence wasn't entirely devoid of physical contact. There were 2 highly meaningful encounters.
They spent 4 days together in Vienna.
And they had a brief, fraught meeting later in a border town called Gmünd.
And we must ask, what was the psychological result of these physical meetings? Did the presence of the real Milena solidify the romance?
Did it break down his barriers and lead to a life together?
It did the exact opposite.
The physical encounters didn't cement the love, they completely shattered the illusion.
The undeniable reality of Milena, the human being, a woman who breathed, spoke, had unpredictable reactions, and possessed her own complex needs, was incompatible with the paper Milena simulation he had spent months coding in his mind.
The real woman broke the avatar.
After those physical meetings, Kafka sprinted back to the absolute safety of his paper fortress.
And shortly after, in November 1920, he abruptly, unilaterally ended their daily correspondence.
He pulled the plug on the life support machine.
Just like that. To understand that abrupt termination, we have to return to the philosophical core of Kafka's existence.
His relationship with his art.
Kafka operated under a deeply ingrained, almost monastic belief system regarding his writing.
He believed, with terrifying conviction, that any emotional, physical, or psychic energy given to a real-world relationship, given to a living, breathing woman, was energy stolen directly from his writing.
Writing wasn't a profession for him. It was his true God, his only viable religion.
And it demanded absolute, unyielding human sacrifice.
To be a husband, to be present lover, to engage in the mundane compromises of a shared life would require him to anchor himself in the material world.
And he believed he was uniquely, ontologically unfit for the material world.
His true domain was the shadows, the realm of angst, the endless bureaucratic labyrinths of the mind.
He did not love Milena, the human being.
He loved
the
her.
idea of Milena.
She was a blank cinematic screen onto which he projected his internal psychological civil war.
She was a mirror for his anxiety and the ultimate silent confessional box.
When he was finally forced to choose between a real, messy, potentially happy life with a woman who genuinely understood his intellect and the agonizing, isolated purity of his writing, he didn't hesitate.
He chose the writing.
He actively chose the agony of art over the reality of living.
He was the meticulous architect of his own misery.
But we must also confront the unsettling reality that this highly engineered misery was the exact fuel required for his genius.
Which brings us to the profound mirror this correspondence holds up to our own lives.
We aren't just dissecting literary history here.
Kafka's tactics, the pushing and pulling, the reliance on written communication to maintain control, the terror of physical vulnerability. These are not relics of 1920.
Not at all. We live in an era perfectly designed to facilitate the paper-Milena dynamic.
How often do we utilize the buffer of a text message, the curation of an online avatar, or the geographic distance of a digital relationship as a shield against the terrifying vulnerability of real, unedited human connection?
It is infinitely easier to cultivate an idealized, perfectly controlled dynamic over WhatsApp than it is to navigate the chaotic, unpredictable reality of sharing physical space with a flawed human being.
We all construct idealized versions of people in our minds. We all interact with our own curated digital ghosts.
Kafka's letters are just a magnification, a brilliant, terrifyingly articulate extreme of a very common human defense mechanism.
The paralyzing fear of being truly seen and the preference for the safe illusion over the risky reality.
We came into this deep dive looking for a grand romance, and what we found was a man who used words not to build a bridge to another soul, but to build an impenetrable fortress around his own.
It is a devastating reality for the man himself.
But it is also the specific psychological crucible that produced some of the most vital, haunting literature of the 20th century.
So true.
Think about that as you process this deep dive. If Franz Kafka had somehow found a way to conquer his dread, if he'd overcome his angst, married Milena, and lived a comfortable, well-adjusted, happy life in Vienna,
Would we have ever received the metamorphosis?
would the world have the trial or the castle?
Is it possible that true artistic immortality sometimes requires the absolute brutal sacrifice of the artist's real-world happiness?
Sometimes, to create a masterpiece that captures the dread of the modern condition, the scientist has to be willing to lock himself inside the laboratory.
A truly haunting philosophical question to end on.
Until next time, keep diving deep.